I'm Caitlin Matson. This is the Green Room. Maestro Daniel Hege is with me to talk about the next Masterworks concert on March the 16th, which features cellist Alban Gerhardt and Dvořák's cello concerto. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Caitlin. How are you?
Doing well, excited about the promise of spring. We get little
Yes,
teases of it here and there, and it's supposed to be a beautiful week next week, and you should have excellent weather for your concert next Sunday, the 16th.
that is perfect.
Tell us about what's on the program.
Well, as a matter of fact, we begin the concert with a piece called To Spring. So that's perfect because, as we know, spring is going to be right around the corner from Sunday, March 16th, when we have the concert. So this will hopefully get us even more in the mood. The piece is written by composer Daniel Pertu. He's professor of composition and theory at Westminster College in New Jersey. And he's also writing a violin concerto for Holly Mulcahy that we're going to play next season. So I thought it would be perfect if we heard some of his music, an overture, to begin this concert so that people could get a little bit of a taste of his compositional voice before we hear Holly's concerto that will come on next season. So, and also the title of the piece was perfect. It's an overture called To Spring, and it was inspired by his young daughters as he watched them grow and develop, and also by a poem by William Blake back from 1783, which has the same title and talks about things that are spring-like in nature. And so this is a very evocative piece. It's just wonderfully orchestrated and has beautiful themes and is very uplifting, as you might expect for a piece called To Spring, where things are budding and coming to life, and we have this promise of great weather and time outdoors.
I was really impressed when I was reading about him, his biography and his approach to composition and how he believes that the music that he writes for people should be accessible to absolutely anybody who has any interest in learning about music, in enjoying what they're hearing, and how he wants the audience to feel like they're hearing something that they understand and that they enjoy.
I think that is so important. I think a lot more composers are thinking this way, contemporary composers. They're thinking about music that needs to be relatable to the audience on a very first listening. And it didn't used to be that way. It used to be, well, they may not get it the first time, but maybe after the third or fourth time, they'll really start to like it. But then they realize, composers have realized that that's not a practical kind of way of thinking about it. And I appreciate Daniel's approach to wanting to thinking about the audience first and foremost, because they're the ones who are paying money to come in and hear it, and they want to be um, they want to have enjoyment listening to it the very first time. So that's what I can really appreciate about his music and his approach and his attitude.
Mendelssohn's Fifth Symphony is also on the program. That certainly is a huge symphony of his, and it contains little snippets of chorales that anybody, especially those who raised in the church, any sort of Protestant congregation, will have flashbacks to, standing in the pews with their parents with hymnals in hands.
Exactly. And in fact, the one that is really highlighted is A Mighty Fortress is Our God. And it's interesting because Mendelssohn grew up in a Jewish household, actually in Berlin. His father was a prominent banker. His grandfather, Moses, was a philosopher. He grew up in a family of privilege, had a lot of access to education, and was extremely precocious. I mean, obviously, without his genius, he couldn't have succeeded, even with the best education. But all of those things coming together made for a very brilliant and precocious young composer. But when he was about 7 years old, his parents decided to baptize him as a Christian. And this was something that happened for a lot of Jewish people at that time, just to help them kind of get through in life a little bit. So he was writing this, and he was actually writing it for a festival, and he wanted to use this hymn. He was a great admirer of Johann Sebastian Bach as well, who harmonized A Mighty Fortress, which was originally written by Martin Luther, the tune itself. And Martin Luther also played flute. So Mendelssohn brings Martin Luther, and Johann Sebastian Bach together and harmonizes it, and also puts the melody of that tune in the flute,
Hmm.
thinking of Luther playing the flute. So it's all these wonderful different aspects of the music all coming together. But it's interesting, the Reformation Symphony of Mendelssohn, he's credited with writing 5 symphonies, and it's number 5, but that's because of the order of publication. He was working on that piece right up to his death and was just not completely satisfied with it. It was actually the second out of 5 that he wrote in the order, the chronology of the
Huh.
writing of the symphony. But because he took so long to revise it and everything, he didn't get around to publishing it before he died. And so the piece was published something like 21 years after he died in 1868. And so that's why it's published last. That's why it's number 5. So it sounds in some ways like a young Mendelssohn, but even a young Mendelssohn was so brilliant. I mean, writing
Yes.
Midsummer Night's Dream when he's 18 years old. I mean, people say that he was even more precocious and advanced at a young age than even Mozart.
Mm.
So we have to keep that in mind. The writing is beautiful. It's Mendelssohn stands right on the cusp of the classical tradition and the romantic tradition. So you can say he's a romantic classicist or a classic romanticist. He uses both, uh, kind of both sides. He's really straddling it in some ways, but he has a voice that is unique and all his own.
We're going to listen to the final movement of this symphony. It is the one that has the chorale, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." And as Daniel just said, starts out with this wonderful solo in the flute, a nod to Martin Luther. So we're going to listen to just a few minutes of this and be back to talk more about the next Masterworks concert of the Wichita Symphony Orchestra on March 16th. That was the finale of Felix Mendelssohn's Symphony Number 5, the Reformation Symphony, and you can recognize that chorale, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." Daniel Hege is with me in the green room talking about the next Wichita Symphony Masterworks concert, which is March the 16th. It is a Sunday, a matinee
Sunday.
at 3 o'clock in Century 2 Concert Hall. For tickets and information, you can go to their website, wichitasymphony.org, or call the box office, which is 316-267-7658. Your guest artist for this concert. There isn't always a guest artist, but we're in luck this time. We have cellist Alban Gerhardt. Can you tell us about his career?
Yes, Alban Gerhardt. Some people have said, and this is a subjective statement. They say he's the best cellist in the world, not named Yo-Yo. So he is a tremendous musician and just a great human being. I've worked with him several times in the past, and every time has just been so fun. He can do anything on the cello, and what I mean by that is he can he can play with the softest sound that can go to the very back of the hall. He can play with a huge ferocious sound. He can play with a big lush sound. He's such a sensitive musician, and he's almost inventing new ways to express the music. And I think it's just going to be an incredible privilege for our audience to get to hear someone of this stature come in and play with us. I've been actually wanting him to come to Wichita for years, but it's been very difficult with his schedule. And of course, they have to fit right into wherever we have Century 2. Um, but this is going to be an exceptional experience for people. You don't want to miss this. I mean, and this is also considered the greatest and most popular cello concerto ever written, hands down, full stop. That's it. There is not competition in terms of the most popular cello concerto ever. It's really like a symphony. And that's why it appears on the second half of the concert. It has that kind of heft to it, has virtuosity, it has every emotion imaginable in it. And I'm sure that Alban will bring everything to it. It's just going to be really wonderful for us to get to hear him. And it's going to be great for me and for the orchestra to work with him on such a profound work as Dvořák's cello concerto.
Is this a piece that Dvořák composed when he was working in America?
Yes. So way back in 1892, in New York City, they were looking for the most famous composer in Europe and most well known. And after Brahms, Tchaikovsky, and Johann Strauss Jr., Dvořák was the one and who was most well known. And so he came over and was actually director of this National Conservatory in New York City, and he traveled all over the United States. And he immersed himself. Dvořák immersed himself in American culture and American folk tunes and all of that. And that's where he wrote here in America is where he wrote his New World Symphony. And it was premiered here. And it was after that, actually, he noticed the cellist, Victor Herbert, who's actually a composer too and wrote 2 cello concertos. Victor Herbert was playing principal on the New World Symphony, and Dvořák just loved his playing. And so that, along with some other motivations to write a cello concerto, he wrote this great cello concerto toward the end of his time, 1894, right before he went back to Prague. And then he did the last touches in June of 1895 to finish the concerto. So it was mostly written in the United States.
And those influences can be heard throughout the concerto, much like you can hear the New World Symphony, the American influence.
Absolutely. Yes, you can hear it. It's all kind of from the similar vein. If you hear the New World Symphony, you listen to the cello concerto, you can hear this connection, the same kind of harmonic language, the same kind of textures. I mean, Dvořák had quite a challenge too, because he wrote this for a fairly large orchestra. And oftentimes composers in the 19th century were kind of staying away from writing cello concertos because of the perceived notion that a cello wouldn't cut through a large orchestra as well because of its range and everything. But he orchestrates it so well, Dvořák does, that he writes it so the cellist can always be heard. And then for the big moments where the orchestra swells up, that's where we can use all of the forces of the orchestra to create that swell.
It's going to be a fantastic program with an absolutely world-class soloist, as they always are. But Alban Gerhardt, as you said, is so well renowned, world renowned. What a
Yes.
treat that he's going to be in Wichita.
I would urge people just to go on YouTube and look for him, Alban Gerhardt. Just see if you can hear him play something. He plays a lot of contemporary music. He plays all the classics, all the major cello repertoire, and just get a flavor for what he can do. And then come to this concert. You will be so excited to hear him live.
This concert is Sunday, March the 16th at 3 o'clock in Century 2 Concert Hall. If you come at 2 o'clock, 1 hour before, there will be a concert talk where Daniel dives deep into the music, even deeper, to enhance your listening experience and add a little bit more to your afternoon. So that's at 2.
And Caitlin does such an amazing job leading those.
Oh, thank you. It's
Always
always the
amazing.
best time for me. I mean, I'm just like a kid in a candy store up there talking music with all of you. Ah.
Well, very much appreciated and makes it very enjoyable.
All right. For tickets, go to wichitasymphony.org, and the box office is 316-267-7658. The concert is Sunday, March 16th at 3. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you, Caitlin.